I met Mark on a random Thursday night at a bar I hadn't even planned on going to. It was one of those last-minute decisions, the kind you don't think twice about until much later. My friends had insisted I needed to get out more to stop wallowing after my last breakup. I wasn't in the mood, but somehow I let them drag me out anyway, figuring I'd stay for an hour, have a drink, and leave. Then I saw him. Mark wasn't the best-looking guy in the room, but he had something about him, something magnetic. The way he leaned against the bar, completely at ease, watching the people around him with quiet amusement. The way he caught my eye and smirked like he already knew I'd be interested. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, it really helps. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. There was a self-assuredness to him that I found both irritating and intriguing. When he made his way over to me, I told myself I wouldn't entertain it. I could already tell he was trouble, the kind of guy who knew exactly what to say to make a woman feel special, who had done this 100 times before. But when he spoke, his voice smooth and teasing, I found myself responding, engaging, matching his playful banter. One drink turned into two. Two turned into a slow walk to his car, my fingers brushing against his jacket, the scent of his cologne lingering in the cool night air. I told myself it was nothing serious, just a bit of fun. Just one night. That was my first mistake. We started seeing each other regularly after that. It wasn't official, there were no labels, no expectations, but we spent more and more time together. Late-night drives with the windows down, the stereo humming soft, unfamiliar tunes. Lazy Sunday mornings where we stayed in bed far longer than necessary, tangled up in sheets, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my skin. I let myself enjoy it because it was easy, uncomplicated. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't in months. But even in the beginning, there were things I couldn't quite ignore. Mark was secretive. Not in an obvious way, he didn't disappear for long stretches of time or cancel plans at the last minute, but there were small things, subtle things. His phone was always face down on the table. Whenever he got a call, he'd step out of the room, voice dropping just low enough that I couldn't make out his words. If I asked, he'd wave it off with a quick just work stuff or nothing important. Then there were the inconsistencies. He never wanted to stay over at my place. It was always his. That, in itself, wasn't unusual. I liked his apartment, and he had a bigger bed, but it was the way he insisted on it that made me pause. And Sundays, he was never available on Sundays. He wouldn't make plans, wouldn't answer texts until late in the evening. When I asked, he shrugged. Just some family stuff, he'd say. Nothing interesting. I told myself it didn't matter. We weren't in a relationship. He didn't owe me explanations. But curiosity has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. One morning, while Mark was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't looking for anything, I hadn't even been thinking about it, but the screen lit up, catching my attention. A name, a heart emoji. I froze. Lena. A strange, hollow feeling settled in my stomach. My first instinct was to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But the phone vibrated again. Another message. Hey baby, I miss you. My fingers clenched around the edge of the sheets. I wasn't the kind of person to snoop, I hated that kind of thing, but this was right there, flashing in front of me like a warning sign I couldn't ignore. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my mind racing through possible explanations. Maybe it was a sister, a close friend, someone from his past who hadn't gotten the memo that things were over. Except, no, deep down I already knew the truth. Mark walked out of the bathroom then, a towel slung around his waist, hair damp. He froze for the briefest second when he saw me looking at his phone. Something wrong, he asked, too casual. I lifted my gaze to meet his. Your phone went off. He crossed the room quickly, picking it up and locking the screen before I could say anything else. It's not what you think. I let out a short, humorless laugh. That's funny. I don't remember telling you what I think. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. It's complicated. Of course it is. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, reaching for my clothes. You should go. Claire, come on. No, my voice was sharp, more certain than I felt. I'm not doing this. I'm not playing the dumb girl who ignores the obvious. Just go. He hesitated like he wanted to argue, but in the end he just exhaled heavily and grabbed his things. The door closed behind him, leaving behind only the scent of his cologne and the dull ache in my chest. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had dodged a bullet. But 2 days later I found myself scrolling through social media, unable to stop myself from searching for that name. And when I found her, my blood ran cold. Lena wasn't an ex. She wasn't some past mistake. She was his girlfriend. And they were still together. I stared at Lena's profile, my heart pounding so hard it made my vision blur. There she was, smiling, radiant, arms wrapped around him. Mark, the man who just 2 days ago had been in my bed, kissing my neck, whispering things in my ear that made me believe, even for a moment, that I was special. The most recent post was from last weekend. Weekend getaway with my love. The caption was sickeningly sweet, accompanied by a picture of them on a beach, Mark's arm possessively wrapped around her waist. I swallowed against the sudden nausea rising in my throat. This wasn't just some casual thing. This wasn't an ex who hadn't let go or a misunderstanding. Mark was in a full-blown relationship, and I had been nothing more than a side piece. My fingers trembled as I scrolled further. They had been together for years. There were anniversary posts, holiday pictures, gifts, little inside jokes in the comments. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I took a deep breath and did what I never thought I'd do. I sent her a message. "Hey, I don't know how to say this, but I think you deserve to know." I hesitated for a moment, staring at the blinking cursor. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I typed out everything. How I met Mark, how long we had been seeing each other, the lies, the secrets. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't leave room for doubt. Then I hit send and waited. The first few minutes stretched endlessly. I kept staring at my screen, watching for the typing indicator, for any sign that she had read the message, that she was processing what I had told her. But nothing happened. I refreshed the chat, as if that would somehow make a response appear. Still nothing. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2. I went about my day, but I was distracted, checking my phone every few minutes, my stomach tight with nerves. Had she seen it? Would she even believe me? Then, finally, the little scene notification appeared, and a message popped up. "Thank you for telling me." I had no idea. That was it. No anger. No accusations. Just a short, polite response that somehow made me feel even worse. I had expected more. I didn't know what exactly, but something. Maybe an emotional outburst. Maybe a long conversation, her asking for proof, for details. But she didn't ask for anything. She just thanked me, and then the conversation ended. I should have felt relief. I should have told myself that I did the right thing, that I had given her the truth, and now it was up to her to decide what to do with it. But instead, I felt sick. My hands were still shaking when I put my phone down, my heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with adrenaline and everything to do with the sinking feeling in my gut that this wasn't over. And I was right. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. Mark. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then the texts started. "What the hell did you do? Why would you talk to her? Call me. Now." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Then the calls started, one after another. I let them go to voicemail. But Mark wasn't the kind of guy who gave up easily. And then, finally, a message that sent a chill down my spine. "If you don't pick up, I'm coming over." My throat went dry. Mark had never been violent. Not with me, but something about that message felt different. It felt like a threat. I hesitated, debating whether to ignore him or call his bluff. But the idea of him showing up at my apartment, banging on my door, causing a scene, I couldn't handle that. So, against my better judgment, I answered his next call. The second I picked up, his voice exploded through the phone. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I flinched but kept my voice steady. "You mean besides the fact that you lied to me? Or that you've been cheating on your girlfriend for months? You had no right to do that," he snapped. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, sarcasm dripping from my voice. I didn't realize exposing a cheater was against the rules. His breathing was ragged. I could hear his frustration through the phone. "Claire, listen. You don't know what you've done. You don't understand our relationship." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I think I understand just fine." Silence. Then his voice dropped to something almost pleading. "Look, I messed up, okay? But you didn't have to go to her. You could have just walked away." I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. "No, Mark. You could have just not cheated." More silence. Then a sharp exhale. "She's going to leave me now." I blinked. "Good." His voice changed then. Became something harder. Darker. "You really think you're a hero here," he said, low and venomous. "You think you did the right thing?" I didn't answer. His voice was sharp now, laced with anger. "I hope you know what you've done. You just ruined something good." That was the last thing he said before hanging up. I stared at my phone, breathing hard. Something about the way he said it made a shiver run down my spine. I told myself it was over. I told myself I had done the right thing. But I had no idea just how much damage had actually been done. Because 3 months later, I checked Lena's profile again, and she was still with him. 3 months passed. 3 months of silence. I hadn't spoken to Mark since that night. I hadn't answered his calls, hadn't responded to his texts, and after a while he stopped trying. At first, I kept expecting him to show up at my door, to demand an explanation, to throw his anger in my face the way he had over the phone. But he never did. At first, I told myself I had won. I had done the right thing. I had told Lena the truth. I had exposed him. And if she had any sense at all, she had walked away from him, left him in the dust, and moved on. I convinced myself of this, repeated it like a mantra, letting the thought comfort me. But deep down, there was an itch. a whisper in the back of my mind. I never got closure. I never found out what happened next. For months, I resisted the urge to check. I told myself that I didn't need to know, that it wasn't my business, that it was over. Until one night, alone in my apartment, I caved. It started innocently enough. I had been scrolling mindlessly through my phone, flipping between social media apps without really looking at anything. My mind had been elsewhere, unfocused, until suddenly I wasn't thinking about nothing anymore. I was thinking about her, Lena. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the search bar. I shouldn't. I shouldn't. But my curiosity had always been my worst enemy. Before I could stop myself, I typed her name. Her profile popped up instantly, and my stomach dropped. There they were, Mark and Lena, still together, still smiling like nothing had ever happened. A fresh post, just hours old, sat at the top of her feed. Date night with my love. I stared at the caption for so long that the words blurred together. The photo was even worse. Mark sat next to her at a restaurant, grinning like the smug asshole he was. His arm draped around her shoulders, holding her close, his other hand wrapped around a wine glass. Lena was leaning into him, her eyes bright, her smile effortless. I swallowed hard, scrolling further. More pictures, more happy moments, weekend trips, laughing selfies, and then I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. An anniversary post. 2 weeks ago. 4 years together and counting. You are my best friend, my soulmate, my everything. Here's to forever. 4 years. 4 years. And she had stayed. I could feel my pulse in my throat, a slow, heavy thudding that made me dizzy. I had given her the truth. I had laid it all out for her. And she had chosen to stay. The thought made my skin crawl. How? How? What the hell had he said to her? What kind of lies had he told? Had he convinced her that I was crazy? That I had made it all up? Had he somehow twisted everything until he was the victim? I felt sick. I locked my phone and threw it onto the bed, breathing hard. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing. I should have been done with this. I should have let it go, but I couldn't, because Mark had won. He had gotten away with it. He had faced no consequences, no guilt, no loss. And that realization filled me with something I hadn't felt before. Not just anger, rage. It clawed up my throat, burned beneath my skin, set every nerve in my body on fire. I thought back to Mark's last words to me, the way his voice had shifted from pleading to cruel in a matter of seconds. You think you did the right thing. You just ruined something good. At the time, I had laughed at him, scoffed at his arrogance, but now I realized he had been right. I hadn't ruined anything, and that was the problem. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. No, not this time. I didn't know what lies he had spun to make her stay, what manipulations he had used to keep her under his thumb, but I did know one thing. If the truth wasn't enough to make Lena leave, then I would make damn sure that staying would be her biggest mistake. I couldn't stop thinking about it. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how many times I told myself to let it go, the anger wouldn't leave me. It sat in my chest like a burning coal, hot and restless, refusing to die out. I had done everything right. I had exposed Mark. I had given Lena everything she needed to walk away, and yet, there they were, still together, still happy, still pretending like nothing had ever happened. I wanted to scream. I wasn't angry at Lena, not really. She was just another victim, another person caught in Mark's web of lies. I had been her once. I knew how easy it was to believe what you wanted to believe, how tempting it was to ignore the red flags, to take comfort in the fantasy rather than face the truth. But Mark was a predator, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was going to do it again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually he would cheat again. It was only a matter of time, and next time it wouldn't be me. It would be someone else. Some other girl sitting in a bar, laughing at his stupid jokes, thinking she was special while he texted Lena under the table, feeding her the same old lies. The thought made my stomach turn. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let that happen. So I made a decision. If Lena wasn't going to leave him on her own, I was going to force her to see the truth. And this time I was going to do it publicly. I spent the next week preparing. First, I watched. I scrolled through their social media, piecing together their routine, where they went, what they did, who they spent time with. Lena loved posting about their dates, little snapshots of their lives together, captioned with things like "best boyfriend ever" and "lucky to have this man by my side." It made me sick. But it also made my job easier. Thanks to her constant updates, I knew where they would be on Friday night, a high-end cocktail bar downtown. One of their favorites, according to her. Perfect. Next, I gathered evidence. I had screenshots, texts from Mark, pictures of us together, proof of our relationship. But that wasn't enough. People like Lena didn't believe words alone. They needed to see it. So I dug deeper. And that's when I found her. Her name was Sophie. A blonde, 24, an aspiring model. She had been commenting on Mark's posts for weeks, flirty little messages, subtle but unmistakable. Curious. I checked her profile, and there it was. A picture of Mark, taken just 2 nights ago, at a bar without Lena. My heart pounded. I scrolled further. Another picture of him, sitting beside her, leaning in close, his hand on her thigh. I exhaled slowly, my pulse racing. This was it. This was my proof. Mark was already cheating again. And this time I was going to make sure Lena saw it with her own eyes. Friday night arrived. I dressed carefully, choosing something understated, something that wouldn't draw attention to me. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there to watch one unfold. When I arrived at the bar, it was packed. People clustered around tables, laughter and music blending together in a low, steady hum. I spotted Mark and Lena almost immediately. They were seated in the corner, Lena sipping on a cocktail, Mark leaning back casually, his hand resting on her knee. I clenched my jaw. It was disgusting how easy it was for him. How effortlessly he played the role of the devoted boyfriend while texting other women behind her back. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then I pulled out my phone and I sent the message to Sophie. Hey, I saw you posted about this bar the other night. You coming tonight? It didn't take long for her to respond. Sophie, OMG. Yes. My friend Mark is here too. LOL. Should be fun. I smirked. Hook, line, sinker. I ordered a drink, pretending to sip it as I watched the scene unfold. 20 minutes later, Sophie arrived. She looked beautiful, long legs, perfect hair, dressed to kill. The kind of girl Mark wouldn't be able to resist, and sure enough, the moment he saw her, his eyes lit up. He stood, excusing himself from Lena with a quick kiss on the cheek. Then he made his way over to Sophie. I held my breath, watching. She grinned when she saw him, and without hesitation he pulled her into a hug, his hands resting far lower than they should have. I glanced at Lena. She hadn't noticed yet, but she would. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. Mark, arms around Sophie. Mark, whispering in her ear. Mark, smiling in a way he never smiled at Lena. Then I sent it to Lena. I told you before, but you didn't listen. So here's your proof. I watched as she pulled out her phone, her face lighting up as she read the message. Then slowly I saw her expression change. Confusion, shock, horror. She looked up, saw Mark, saw Sophie, saw his hands, his smile, the way he leaned in too close, her hands clenched around her glass. Then she stood. I felt my pulse skyrocket as she stormed across the bar, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Mark, her voice cut through the noise like a blade. Mark turned, startled. Babe. Slap. The sound rang out across the bar. Sophie gasped. Mark staggered back, clutching his cheek. And Lena? Lena was shaking, her face red with anger, her breathing ragged. You lied to me, she spat. You swore you weren't cheating. You swore it was just a misunderstanding. Lena, listen. I am done listening, she shouted. I should have left you months ago. Then she turned, her eyes locking on Sophie. And you? Good luck. He'll do the same thing to you. Sophie looked stunned, embarrassed. And then, without another word, Lena turned and walked out. Mark stood frozen for a moment, his face pale. Then, slowly, he turned toward the exit, as if he was going to chase her. I wasn't about to let that happen, so I stepped in front of him, smiling sweetly. Not so fast. His eyes widened as he saw me. Claire, I tilted my head. Surprised, his jaw clenched. You planned this. Of course I did, I said. You didn't really think you'd get away with it, did you? His hands curled into fists, his face darkening with fury. But he didn't say a word, because he knew he had lost, and I had won. Mark's face twisted with anger, his jaw tight, his nostrils flaring as he stared at me. He looked like he wanted to say something, wanted to scream, curse, deny, but for the first time, he had no way out. He was trapped. The entire bar had gone silent. Conversations had died, drinks were abandoned mid-sip, and all eyes were now locked onto us. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. People were whispering, shifting in their seats, and more than a few had their phones raised, recording. Mark turned toward Lena, desperation creeping into his voice. Babe. Listen. Babe. Lena let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Don't you dare call me that. She looked between me and Sophie, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her whole body vibrating with emotion. The betrayal, the humiliation, it was all written across her face. You lied to me, she hissed. For months, Mark took a cautious step toward her. Lena, I swear, it's not what you think. She scoffed, shaking her head. Not what I think. She yanked out her phone, pulling up something on the screen. Because according to this, she turned the phone around, revealing the very same photos I had sent her months ago, the ones of Mark with me, their timestamps still visible. It's exactly what I think. The color drained from Mark's face. He had nowhere to run. Sophie crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes. Wow, she muttered. So, you were cheating on both of us at the same time. Mark turned to her, his expression shifting, scrambling to regain control. Sophie, come on. We weren't exclusive. Oh, fuck you, she snapped. Lena looked like she was about to explode. Her whole body trembled, her breathing sharp and ragged. The weight of everything she had ignored, everything she had forgiven, it all crashed down on her in real time. And then, without warning, she took a step forward and slapped him. The sound echoed through the bar, sharp and unforgiving. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Mark staggered back, his head snapping to the side, his hand flying up to his cheek in shock. Lena's eyes were blazing. You piece of shit. Mark's face darkened. His hands curled into fists. For a second I saw something flicker in his expression, something dangerous. Something that made my stomach clench. Then a voice cut through the thick air. Hey, asshole, one of the bartenders called out. You're done here. A bouncer appeared out of nowhere, a towering man with arms the size of tree trunks. He placed a firm hand on Mark's shoulder. Time to go. Mark hesitated, looking around like he was searching for anyone to take his side. But no one did. He was alone. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head in disbelief. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed toward the exit, shoving past Lena without so much as a glance. The door slammed shut behind him. For a few moments, the entire bar was still. Then, somewhere in the back, someone started clapping, and just like that, the whole place erupted. Laughter. Cheers. Even the bartender raised a glass in approval. Lena stood frozen, her hand still tingling from the slap, her chest heaving. Slowly, she turned toward me, her face unreadable. I wasn't sure what to expect. Anger? Resentment? Gratitude? But then, to my complete surprise, she laughed, a breathless, disbelieving laugh, shaking her head. Holy shit, she muttered. I should have done that a long time ago. I smirked. Better late than never. Sophie let out a huff, brushing past us toward the bar. I need a drink after that disaster. Lena and I exchanged a glance, then, without speaking, followed her. Mark was gone. His game was over. But this was just the beginning. We sat at the bar, a strange, electric energy still crackling between us. Lena was still shaking slightly, the adrenaline running its course through her veins, but there was something new in her expression, something lighter. Sophie downed her drink in one go, then let out a slow, exaggerated exhale. Well, that was fucking wild, she muttered, running a hand through her perfect blonde waves. Lena let out a breathless laugh. Tell me about it. I signaled the bartender for another round. So I said, tilting my head. What now? Lena stared down at her glass, swirling the dark liquid inside. Now she repeated, almost to herself. Now I move the hell on. I smiled. Good answer. Her gaze flicked up to meet mine. I mean it. No more excuses. No more maybe he can change, I don't care what he says, or if he shows up begging at my door. I'm done. Sophie raised her glass. To being done with shitty men. We clinked our glasses together, and for the first time in months, I felt something inside me loosen. Relief. Relief. Satisfaction. Freedom. The weight of Mark, of everything he had put me through, was finally gone. Lena let out a deep sigh and leaned back in her chair. You know, she said, a small smirk playing on her lips, if you ever decide to destroy another asshole, please invite me. That was surprisingly therapeutic. I chuckled. I'll keep that in mind. We spent the rest of the night talking not about Mark, not about betrayal, but about ourselves. Our lives, our dreams, the things we had put on hold for men who didn't deserve us. And for the first time I realized something. Mark wasn't special. He wasn't some once-in-a-lifetime love. He wasn't even a particularly good liar. He was just another man who thought he could play games and get away with it. And now, everyone knew the truth. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone was buzzing with notifications. I groaned, reaching for it blindly, my head still a little foggy from the drinks. I squinted at the screen, and then I laughed. The video had gone viral. Not just in our friend group, not just in our city, everywhere. I clicked on one of the links someone had sent me. The video was perfect. Someone had recorded the entire confrontation. From the moment Lena slapped Mark to the second he stormed out, red-faced and humiliated. The caption? When karma comes full circle, the cheater's downfall. I scrolled through the comments, unable to stop grinning. This is better than reality TV. Lena deserved better. Hope she never looks back. The way he just stood there like a dumbass. Iconic. I need an update. Is Mark still alive after this? I clicked over to Mark's profile. Private. Of course. I checked Lena's next. She had posted a story, just a simple black screen with white text. Free at last. I chuckled, shaking my head. Good for her. Mark wasn't just humiliated. He was finished. His name was everywhere. Even his workplace got wind of the video. And according to a mutual friend, his boss wasn't thrilled about having an employee whose name was suddenly associated with cheating dirtbag all over the internet. It was over. I had won. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. A week passed. Then, too, Mark disappeared. Not literally, of course. He was still around, still had to go to work, still had to exist in the same city as the people who had watched his downfall unfold in real time. But he was quiet. No more social media posts, no more public outings. He stopped showing up at the places he used to frequent, probably out of fear that someone would recognize him. And when people did see him, they laughed. It turned out the internet never forgets. His reputation was shattered. Everywhere he went, he got whispers, side eyes, and the occasional, "Hey, aren't you the guy from that cheating video?" Couldn't have happened to a better person. Lena, on the other hand, was thriving. She changed her profile picture, chopped her hair, started posting photos of herself out with friends, genuine photos, ones where she actually looked happy. She got a new job, moved to a different apartment, and even took a solo vacation. She was living. And then, one night, I got a text from her. "I know I don't owe you anything, but thank you." Not just for exposing him, for waking me up. I smiled at my screen, warmth spreading through my chest. "You deserve better. Don't forget it." We weren't best friends. We probably never would be. But in a strange way, we understood each other. And me, for the first time in forever, I felt light. No more checking my phone, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. No more anger curling inside me like a snake, waiting to strike. I had taken back control. One night, as I was walking home from dinner with friends, I passed by our bar. The one where I had first met Mark. I stopped for a second, staring at the neon sign buzzing faintly in the night. So much had started in that place. The excitement, the lies, the betrayal. For a brief moment, I wondered if Mark still came here, if he sat in the same seat, trying to charm someone new. Maybe, maybe not. It didn't matter. I turned away, stepping back onto the sidewalk, the cool night air wrapping around me. And this time, for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't look back.